Life after you get your nervous system regulated becomes very interesting. Some of the things I found at the regulation, right? Where it's like, first, when I began my healing journey, I thought regulation was the destination. I mean, I really believed that one day my nervous system would finally settle, like my triggers would disappear, and I would arrive at the place called healed, and feel whole. But what I found instead was that regulation was never the destination. In fact, it was the foundation. And foundations don't always feel like arrival. They feel more like soil being prepared. The first thing I found after regulation was peace in my body. For the first time in a long time, right? My shoulders didn't feel so tense. My chest wasn't always tight. I became more aware when I was not breathing correctly. My body, I wasn't clenching my jaw when I was asleep, so my body wasn't constantly bracing for something to go wrong. It felt like the ground beneath me had softened. But what surprised me was this, my body's feeling, finally feeling okay, but my mind needed more time to catch up to what was happening with my body. And so my body was beginning to settle into safety, but my thoughts were still scanning for danger. I remember having entire weekends planned and still feeling anxious, anyway, having entire weekends with nothing planned, right? But I'm steady moving around, steady cleaning, just finding shit to do because I wasn't settled in that. And it wasn't anything wrong, right? It's just my nervous system for decades had learned that being still meant something, we were bracing for something, meant something was coming. So although the soil had been tilled, but there was still a part of me waiting for this storm any given moment. And so I thought regulation would feel like arrival. Instead, it was really just, my entire being learning a new language, from the affirmations every day, telling myself all this beautiful things about me that I had never done before. My body was ooh, thank you, finally. This is the treatment we like. But so my body was getting adjusted to this positivity, this rest, but my mind still didn't know how to trust it. Didn't know how to trust it at all. And so as I kept healing, I realized regulation brought me softness too. Not not what I used to consider softness to be, meaning not weakness, but this softness of, my changing my view about what softness is, coming to understanding of what that means more. Because before, all I knew was strength. And to me, strength meant endurance. To me, strength meant surviving, carrying everything and never needing nothing and just pushing through no matter what the ground beneath me felt like. And so regulation showed me a different kind of strength. It showed me the strength of softened soil, right? Because softened soil can actually receive something. it can grow things, you know. And I started noticing this in really small ways. Like when I was not regulated, I would be rehearsing every conversation, especially if I had to brace for a difficult conversation. I'll be rehearsing that conversation before it even happened, after it happened, you know, something happened at work or whatever that didn't quite go as intended. I am replaying all of the whole situation over and over again. And so I stopped rehearsing every difficult conversation before it would happen. I stopped apologizing for simply taking up space, and I stopped feeling responsible for everyone's emotions. You know, like, how do you feel about me? Why do you feel that way? All the questions, right? And it was like something in me stopped resisting every drop of water life was trying to give me. Man. And so, regulation softened the way I spoke to myself. It softened the grief. It softened relationships. And it softened what I demanded from myself just to feel worthy of rest. And that's when I understood something I don't think I had language for before. Healing was never the destination. It was the foundation. And foundations, like soil, are not the final form. They are what everything else grows from. And it's the reason, you know, I use this reference, because that's what I've come to know is like healing is like tending a garden. You know, this series is called the Garden Series, and healing is just like that. You know, before any new seeds can be planted, the soil has to be turned, the weeds have to be pulled, and sometimes things that have been growing for years have to be uprooted, right? And it's not because they're bad, it's because they no longer belong in the ecosystem that you've been working towards to emerge. And so, yeah, some of what I had to uproot it wasn't a means of that it wasn't healthy, it was just familiar. And I went through a process of grieving old versions of Sasha. So those familiar things also were no longer necessary. So like hypervigilance, that once kept me safe, right? But now I feel safe. Overworking, that once gave me control in my mind, right? And now I'm like, I don't have to control anything aside from my own emotions and responses, right? My actions. And people pleasing, that once helped me feel like I belong. And everything about me for quite a long time has been about being the strong one. I'm the eldest daughter. I didn't grow up with a lot, so that role is the role I knew how to survive in. I know it. I know how to move in it, I know what to do in it. And so these areas, though, they were not in it like an enemy to me. They were necessary in the time that I needed them to survive. But that's the thing. These ways about ourselves and that identity that I created wasn't meant to be permanent roots to my garden. And so regulation gave me the ability to finally see my garden more clearly and what's in it. And when you can finally see your garden clearly, you start asking different questions. Not just what kept me alive, but what do I want to grow now that I don't have to survive everything? And that's where something unexpected showed up. Loneliness. Yeah. Not the loneliness of abandonment. Not the kind that makes you search for someone to complete you. Because, like, you have recognized that you've not been alone. You have you, and I have God inside of me, right? Like, I am, you feel me? And so I am fine in that solitude, right? When I learned how to sit with myself, it was like sitting in a quiet garden. I learned how to trust my own presence. I learned that I could be alone and still feel safe. But there was still a loneliness. The loneliness of becoming, because even though something in me was softening and settling, I was still becoming someone new in real time. And I didn't fully recognize her yet. For so long, I had known myself through survival. I knew who I was when everything was on fire, right? Like, I knew who I was when everyone needed me, and I knew who I was when I had to hold everything together. But I didn't yet know who I was in a quiet garden. And because I was still learning myself, it sometimes felt like other people didn't fully recognize me either. And I recognized, like, it wasn't because they didn't care, but because I was literally changing faster than I can even explain. And so I found myself standing in the middle of my own garden, mid-transformation, no longer who I used to be, but not yet fully rooted in who I was becoming. And I think every garden has a season like that, right? A season where the ground is being cleared, but nothing has fully grown yet. A season that looks empty from the outside, but inside, everything is being rearranged. A season where healing asks you not just to find yourself, but to introduce yourself to yourself. It's great. It's wild, right? What I know now is this, that loneliness wasn't a sign something was wrong. It was just evidence that something was being replanted. The space left behind by survival wasn't emptiness. It was fertile ground. Room for that softness, room for that joy, room for curiosity, room for rest, and room for relationships that don't require armor. Room for a life that isn't built around surviving the soil, but living in it. And so maybe that's what I found after regulation. It's not an ending, not arrival, not perfection, but a beginning, a softer, quieter beginning. A beginning where healing was never the destination. It was simply the soil I needed to grow something new. And so these are things that can come during the process of becoming. And as you guys know, I preach this here, and I try to live by it always in the way I move and how I show up for myself, which is with so much compassion during time of rearranging and replanting and just through all of it, you know. And so thank you for listening. Tend to your garden. You know, this is a space where I just want to give you a little more ease and some awareness around what can happen for you when you're taking on such a beautiful journey of this life, returning to yourself, making room for all that you desire, all that you love, breaking down systems and beliefs and things of that nature. And so we gotta, you know, as always, we gotta pull out the weeds so we can make room for truly more of us, more of self, because your self to its core is just beautiful and happy. So much love, with love and courage always. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.